I'm going to go ahead now and some of these cam shafts are loose. You can see that you can lift them out of here, but they're still connected over here by the chain. So what I'm going to do is try to get this chain off, and you can just kind of try to wiggle these out. You can wiggle the chain off, and then these camshafts will lift out like so. And I want to caution everyone about camshafts and crankshafts. Anything that is meant to take a lot of twisting torque this way, when these are built, if you were to drop this on the ground just like this, it would probably break. So just be careful with these, because they're meant to take a lot of twisting torque this way, but they are very brittle this way, and they will break fairly easily if you drop them straight down like this, or kind of on an angle, whatever. Just be aware that you can't throw these around. These are still very kind of delicate in certain ways. So I'm going to wrap these up actually in bubble wrap, because they're in good shape. I don't want to mess them up anymore. They look really good. The teeth look really good. So I'm going to wrap them up the best I can and make sure that I take good care of them. I've wrapped up the two camshafts and the camshaft cover. I mean, it's not perfect protection, but it's something. And that's probably the best I can do right now, is just try to do something in it. Plus, this will keep them from getting any dirt on them. I'm ready now to take the valve tappets off. I'm not sure if that's the technical name for them, these valve tappets. These round parts right here are just cups that go over the valve. And there's one for each valve on each side. This is the exhaust side, there's 8. On the intake side, there's also 8. So I'm going to take a magnet and pull these out. And I've got bags for each one of them. So this is the number 1 cylinder side of the engine. So I've just numbered them 1, 2, 3. This E1, E2, E3, I1, I2, I3, and so on. So I've got a bag for each of those. I'm going to pull these out. I'll probably skip this video or maybe speed this up, but the reason you want to take these out and bag them individually is because each one of these has a very specific spacer underneath here that goes to that valve. So I'm going to shut the camera off for a second. I'll get the magnet, show you that. I've got my magnet. You just put it on there and then pull this straight out, and you can see that there's the cup. And if you look inside there, you see that shiny silver part right there? That's actually a spacer, and you can take it out like so, and it has a number on it. This one says 182. They're all going to say different numbers, or they might all say the same number. I'm not sure, but just to be safe, keep them with the cup that they came off of, and make sure you mark it for the valve that it came off of. And when we take the valves out of the head, we'll put them together with these so that we know all the valves go in their same spot and they all have the same spacers that came out. I'm not going to film all this. I'm going to pull every one of these off just like I did and bag them up, obviously, and I'll be back after I've done that. I've got all the exhaust side out. I've got them all in their bags, so all the spacers and the bags, and I know exactly where these are going to go. And you can even bag these up together in a bigger baggie for the exhaust side and the intake side. That's what I'm going to do. Got all the valve cups off. Now, I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and get this head off of here. And there are several bolts. You can see they're down inside here, if you can see that at all. Down inside here. So I'm going to go research actually what the bolt pattern is, because very similar and even more crucial to this head is to take these off in the right way, because these are very highly tensioned as opposed to the camshaft cover that we took off here. That could warp the head if we take these off in the wrong way. So I'm going to go research that. I'll be back. We're ready to go ahead and take the head off. Inside the head there are 10 12mm, I believe they're 12mm bolts. And on the side here, there are 2. These are 8mm. The 12mm inside the head, we need to be very careful about the order and the way we take them out. These 2 I'm just going to take out right now. These are the bolts that go in the side of the head here. I'm going to do what I always do with the bolts I take off the engine. I'm going to create a bag for them, put them in the bin. I'll get you set up on the other side where we can see maybe down into the head, and we'll show you the order in which we need to take these bolts out. So now we're going to take the 10 12mm bolts out of the inside of the head. I'm going to lift you up here so I can maybe show you down in here. There's one here, and there's, you know, also one in here. So there's 10 of these. And what we need to do to loosen these is we need to start in the middle. It doesn't matter which one, and we need to kind of go in a spiral order. And it may not be as important when the head is nice and cool, when the engine's cool. So never take this apart if this is hot. Obviously, you can warp this head. There's more of a chance of it. But I'm going to loosen these up now in that order. I'm just going to give them a quarter turn each. So this is actually the third quarter turn I've done these, and they are pretty loose now. So I'm just going to get the power drill. I think they're loose enough that there's no chance of warping the head, and I'm just going to take them out in that same order. So I'll be right back. Got my handy power drill. I'm just going to take these all the way out now. It's kind of hard to grab these, you know, you can't get your fingers down in there to grab them, so I just have this little magnet. I'm just going to pull them out, and it doesn't really matter what order you do this in, but I do want you to make sure that you keep these washers. They shouldn't be able to slide off, but if they are able to slide off, just make sure you keep them. And I don't think there's any order that these need to go in, so I'm going to set these aside, and they'll go in the bag with the other bolts that we took off earlier. There they are, all the bolts out of the head. Don't drop them like I just did. I'm going to put these in the bag with the other ones, and we'll get this head off. So you can see, you know, there's coolant leaking out of this already. I think that's pretty normal since we've just created a gap here where the coolant can get out. I'm going to just pull this head off of here. It should be pretty easy to take off of here. Just give it a little wiggle. If it's not this easy to take off, you may need to give it a tap with a hammer. But there it is. There's the head. I'm going to set this aside, and we'll go on to the rest of the engine. Now that we've got the head off, this side is the engine mating side, or the piston mating side. And in between the head and the pistons, there's a head gasket. That's this part. Now I'm taking a look at this. Let me try to fit this back on here real quick. And my human eyeball, I don't see any real sign of a crack or anything in this head, but we are going to test that with a kind of magnaflux test. One thing I did notice is that if I take the head gasket off, I'll just set it aside for a minute. And if you look at this side of the head, this should be very clean when you put it back together. So there are some pieces of paint, since this head was painted. You know, not a whole lot, but some could have made a problem. Let me look at the, if I look at the other side of this head gasket, flip this over. And specifically right here, which would be right here on this mating surface, it's a little rough right here. And this, there's a pretty good amount of, I guess that's primer and paint on this gasket. Now I don't know for sure if that's enough to cause this thing to leak into the engine. And there's also some down here. Well, that is a lot right there. I mean, I can feel that. I shouldn't be able to feel any of this. And let me pull this up here, maybe you can see it better. I mean, that even looks like it's had coolant flowing across it into the piston. So I don't want to say this is the problem yet, but we'll certainly magnaflux this, and we'll get a new head gasket. Obviously, don't ever reuse the head gasket, even though this one looks fairly new. It's going in the trash, and we're gonna clean this all up and magnaflux it, which will be part of the video later on. So I'm gonna go ahead and clean this up right now, and I'll bring you back. Before I go ahead and clean this head up, I'm gonna go ahead and take all of these valves out. So I'm gonna show you how to do that. And basically what we need to do is this inside here, there's a spring. Every single one of these valves has a set of springs or a single spring. I think the exhaust, this is the exhaust side, the smaller side, has a single spring. You can see that. And the intake, a little bit larger and has a flat tappet part right here, has a double spring, or what they call a progressive spring. And if you look down in here, we need to compress this on both sides. So we're going to put a tool on here that's going to pinch this together and compress this spring set. And if you look down in here, there are two little kind of horseshoe or half moon, whatever you want to call them, shaped keepers. And we're going to compress this spring enough that we can get those keepers out, and that will allow the spring to come off and the valve to go out the other side. So I'm going to get you set up, and I'm going to show you how to do one of these. It's going to take a long time to do all of them, but I'm going to put them in the same bag. If you remember the video where we took the tappet cups off and we made a separate bag for each one, this is what we're going to call number 1. So this is exhaust 1, exhaust 2, exhaust 3, exhaust 4, etc. And then intake 1, intake 2, intake 3, intake 4, etc. So we're going to put these in the same bags as the tappet cups that we took off of here. So I'll get this one off right here. I'll show you how to do this one. And I'm going to shut the camera off and do the rest. It just takes a little while to do that. I've got my spring compressor kit, specifically made for valve springs. I'm going to get this set up, and I'll show you how to compress these valve springs. So the first thing you need to do is you need to find the fitting that fits over this end of your valves. And this one, I believe, is a 23 millimeter. And it seems to fit, even though they're different sizes, it fits on this valve, and it looks like it will also work for this intake side. So I'm going to get this clamp put together and show you how to do this. So the way we've got this set up is we put one side against this flat side of the valve, and the other side of the clamp has the fitting that fits that side of the spring. And what we're going to do is we're going to turn this, and it's going to compress the spring in here. So I just wanted you to be able to see the other side first. I'm going to try to get this set up so you can see, if you can see in there, there's a little space, and we'll be able to, once the spring is compressed, we'll be able to get those keepers out and then unscrew this to let the spring out. So I'm going to get you set up and we'll do that. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn this, and you should be able to see this spring compress. And that's really all you need, is just enough to get the keeper out. In fact, the keeper fell out. So this is one of the keepers right here. And do not lose these like I just did. Okay, I'm going to have to find that. A magnet is good for that, but the other keeper is still in here. So I'm going to grab the magnet. I'm going to get this keeper out. I'm going to make sure we get all of this spring and valve put together in the bag that we made earlier. So I used my magnet to find the keeper that I dropped. There is the keeper, so you can see it better. kind of a conical shaped half cone, whatever you want to call it. There's two of them. I'm going to set it here, and I'm going to reach in here with the magnet and just grab the other one. So now you can see I've got the other half of that. So now we should be able to unscrew this. And that just fell out. So the piece that fell out is what helps hold the keepers on. And if you notice, this is an exhaust spring. So there's a spring, and this sits in there, and the keepers sit in this hole right here to keep that valve in. I'm going to push the valve out the other side. So this is an exhaust valve, and you can pull it out. So there's the exhaust valve. And they don't look horrible. I'm going to show you how to lap these. As long as this head is good, we will lap these valves in, just so they'll last a little bit longer. But that's how you get these valves out. Now, I'm not going to make you sit through me doing this for all of these, so I'm going to go ahead and get that done off camera, and we'll come back and we'll see with all the valves out. Voila! Through the magic of editing, we've got all of the valves out of the head. We're going to clean this head, and then we're going to magnaflux it. We're going to do this later. We're going to do the rest of the engine tear down first, because we're going to magnaflux the rest of that too, to make sure that none of this has cracks. Although I already suspect that it was this gasket had some gunk under it and was leaking into the piston. We're going to magnaflux it anyway, so I'm going to put this aside for now. We'll clean it all up together with the rest of the engine after we've torn that down. The next thing we need to take apart, the last thing we took off, was the cylinder head, and we took the valves out. The next pieces that we need to take off before we can split these crankcase halves apart is this clutch basket. We need to take off the torque wheel and these timing chain tensioners. And we're probably going to order a new set of these and a timing chain also, just to be sure. But let's look at this clutch basket first. This whole thing is where the clutch plates sit. And there's one nut holding this part on right here, and it's this big nut. I'm not sure what size it is yet. But what I want to show you really quick is this nut is held in place when the engine is put together by somebody taking a punch and punching this part of the nut down, if you can see that right there. So we've got to straighten that out before we try to take this nut off. We're just going to take a screwdriver and kind of tap it in there to straighten that out, and that'll make it easier for us to get that nut off of this clutch basket. So I'm going to get you set up. We'll do that. I believe we've got that mostly straightened out. Now I have a tool that I created to hold on to the sides of these teeth so that we don't damage the entire basket. I'm going to get that tool, and I'm going to get the air impact wrench, because I have a feeling this one's going to be on pretty good. So I'm going to get those together, and I'll be back. I've got my clutch basket holding tool on here, and you can see it's just a cross brace with a couple of pieces of bent metal that I can stick in these teeth here to keep this from turning. And I've got a 30mm socket on the air gun. So I'm going to try this, and you may see me make a fool of myself. We'll see. Okay. So that just took a little more force on the actual tool, and here's the tool. I mean, it's not too difficult. It's just really just a couple of pieces of, I think this is 1/4 inch, steel flat, and I just bent them at a 90, put a bolt in it. It's kind of like a scissors. You can put it in there, hold those teeth, just to get this bolt off. So I'm going to bag this thing. There's a washer behind it here. Get this washer off. There's a washer. And there's another washer behind that. It does not seem to want to come off, so I should be able to just wiggle this whole basket piece out, like so. But this washer came off with it. Just make sure you don't lose that one. And you want to kind of keep these in the order that they go on the basket. This part, I don't know if it'll just come off or not. After a little bit of wiggling and just kind of maneuvering it around, this piece does actually just slide off. It's not pressed on. You can see here are the clutch springs. So we're going to keep this all together, like so. And we'll get to this. And you notice this is pretty loose, this chain. But this is the oil pump down here. And this chain is essentially meant to be this loose. So there's no timing about it or anything. It's just turned by the crankshaft. So don't worry that this chain is loose. I've turned the engine around before I take the other parts off, and we're going to try and get this flywheel off. This is the flywheel. If you remember, we took the stator off. It sat right in here. And I don't think there's any reason to hold it. I think with an air gun, like so, and this is a 14 millimeter. So I'm just going to kind of try to get it off there. Okay. So that came loose. Now this flywheel itself is pressed on. So we're going to have to get a puller to get this out. Before I go get the puller to pull off the flywheel on the other side of the engine, I'm going to go ahead and try to get the rest of this timing chain out of here. So I'll quit turning the engine. Hopefully it'll not mess with it too much and get all these parts out and get them labeled and put away. But this is a 14 millimeter also. Now this is the trigger wheel for the pulse generator that sits inside the old casing on this side. So I'm just going to try to get it off here with this. Hopefully it won't be too bad. Okay. So this is the washer. You can see it's fairly thick. And the 14 millimeter bolt that hold this trigger wheel on. Now this trigger wheel should just pull off. And if you'll notice, when we put this back together, it's got this very distinct, almost like a set of missing teeth at this point. And that corresponds to this same spot on this crankshaft. So it's going to be kind of hard to put that back on the wrong way. We just need to make sure we have the timing marks out when we put it back on. So I'm going to get the rest of this off. We're going to take these guides off, but I'm going to get this chain out first so that I'm not messing with too much more of this chain. While I was trying to get this chain out, it's given me a little trouble because of this timing chain guide. It goes down inside the engine here, and it keeps the timing chain from sliding back and forth too much. And you can see it's got a little lip on it right here that won't let the chain slide out this way. So we're going to have to take this nut off right here. I think it's at 10. I'm going to check it. Be right back. So it is a 10 millimeter, and I'm still using the air wrench. This is far overkill for any of these bolts that I'm taking out, but it's what I have right now, and I'm too lazy to go get anything else. So here we go. Bolt is out. Now we should be able to just slide this out of the way. I'm not sure if it'll come up, so it'll come up out of the engine this way. Okay, so I'm going to kind of set these together right now. And now we're going to try and get the rest of this chain out of here. So I should be able to now slide this chain down a little bit and then just pull it up through the engine. So here now we've got the chain also. And there's one more guide. This is the guide that the chain tensioner that goes through here pushes against. And this looks like it might be a hex nut. I'm not sure what kind of nut that is. I'm going to figure that out, and I will be right back when we're ready to take this out. This bolt here for the timing chain tensioner guide is a 5mm hex nut. So we're going to just get that off. And this whole thing should just slide down. We'll inspect it for wear. We'll clean it up a little bit, but it looks not too bad. It doesn't look like it's got a ton of wear. So I'm going to package all these things up so I don't lose them. But that's the timing chain removal. Now we've got this oil pump chain that we can take off now. So there's just one bolt holding this gear on. This one up here on the clutch shaft, it slides back and forth. So we shouldn't have a problem getting that part off once we get this off. So let's try that. So I've just kind of got a screwdriver wedged in there. Let me see if that's enough just to get this out. Okay, to the bolt. Here's the bolt that holds the oil pump gear on. Now we should just be able to slide both of these out. That comes off, and this one should just slide straight off. So here we've got the oil pump chain and the drive from the clutch that drives the oil pump. Now if you notice, this drive has two pieces. It's got the gear here, and it's got this, I don't know what you want to call this, a slide bushing, something similar to that. But we're just going to put these together in a bag, and when we take the oil pump off, we'll package them all together. Hey everyone. Last night when I stopped working on this engine, I was getting ready to pull the flywheel off. I was reading up on how to do it, and if you look here, there are some threads inside here. And this, I believe, and I was unable to verify this, but what I've read online is this is a metric, and it's an M20 by 1.5. So it's a 20mm wide bolt with a 1.5 thread pitch. I looked all over the place and could not find one, except on Amazon, where it looked like they wanted like $30 for one bolt for this. So what I did was, let me get you set up right here. I just used my 3-jaw puller. You know, this is a fairly large one, and I put it on here like so. And what I noticed was that this part was a little too big to fit in there. So I just stuck a socket that fit inside there on here like this. So it kind of went on like this, and then these hook around there, and then you kind of tighten it up with this gun. And it came right off. Flywheel off. The next part we've got to pull off is this gear right here, and this is what the starter engages. So there's a gear here, which here engages this gear, and when the starter turns, it turns this gear. I'm not sure which way. In any case, this just pulls off. So that's it. It just comes off. And then we've got a bearing here. This is a needle bearing. This bearing is pressed on, so I don't believe we're going to be able to take that off at all. So we're just going to leave that. And this is the end of the crank shaft. And if you look on this side, there's a key. It says not to take this key out. I'm just going to leave that in there for now. The next piece we've got to take out is here. And this is an external shift linkage. This is what actually does the shifting when you hit the shift lever. So this part right here just pulls out. And it may take a little, I'm going to move to the side here because it may take a little bit of force to get it all the way out. So on this side, this is where your foot shifter will connect on the other side of the engine. And here is what moves the shift, the shift drum around, and make sure that when you take this off, you don't lose this. In this case, it looks like it's clipped on. In some cases, it might not be, but this is what they call a thrust washer. Actually, this is the thrust washer, and it was stuck on the engine. So we want to make sure we keep these together. And that thrust washer just goes right here.